Hi everyone, it's Frugal here. As always, I have my coffee, because otherwise somebody might just get killed. Let's talk today about buying a property with friends or family. So yes, you can't maybe afford it. It might be a case that you actually love your family so much. It might be that you've inherited this property together with them and you basically want to put it in all your names. There's many different reasons why people buy property together. It might be you've inherited the money and you just want to have it something solid, but there's many reasons, but there's also many dangers and many pros and cons and all of those things. So let's get into some of these things. Some of the pros would include that you basically are diversifying your risk a little bit. So for example, if you're buying a 500,000 Rand property with 5 people of 100,000 Rand each, if the property does go south or something bad happens, you're not losing a full 500,000 Rand. You are losing a fraction of that. And remember, these things happen. If it happens in property, it happens in other places as well. It happens in the stock market. So another thing that you get is when you're buying it together with property, if something does go wrong, you need to replace the geyser, it's split a little bit. So each person pays in what they can and how they can. That's how I got on the property ladder. I actually bought a property with my sister and my dad. And from there on, we just, grew the property portfolio. So, but there's obviously a couple of cons as well. One of them is, what if one of the people get retrenched or they can't pay in that money anymore? And that often happens with things like stokvels and if you're buying it just on everybody's name. So let's get a bit into the nitty-gritty here. The structures and just around how should you think about it and how should this work. In some cases, it might be that one person brings the money, the other person brings the deal. And the third person might be bringing a handyman, he's a handyman and he's able to fix up the property. So everybody brings a skill to the table and everybody brings something that they actually add. In another case, it might be that you have 5 people each adding the same amount of money. Now, this is normally what happens in a stokvel or something similar. The problem is, like I've mentioned, is that what if everybody can't pay the amount? Or what if one person feels that they're not getting the full extent of what they should be getting? So this is a bit of a problem and this needs to be managed. And how do you manage that? Yes, you manage that with contracts, legal contracts. Don't just go and print out a single one-pager. You need a lawyer. You need somebody who knows about property law, somebody that knows about how to work with partnerships and all of these technical things. So now let's get into that structures part. The first structure that you might want to consider is a partnership. So for example, if it is you and your wife, then yes, you want to have a partnership maybe. I just want to mention here, depending on the goal of your properties, while you're buying it, I'm talking here about investment properties. If you're buying it as your primary residence, that's wonderful. Put it in your own name, put it in a trust, do whatever you like. That is all up to that. If you're investing in property and you're thinking of growing your property portfolio and you're thinking of also selling that property in the near future, if it's on your own name, then you might actually get a little bit, a bit more lenient with regards to a tax break, with regards to capital gains and all of that. And because you've got more than one person, it's also split accordingly. The first 40 grand is free per year, and then 40% of that of your profit that's left over does get basically then gets taxable, but I'll add some of the links in this video as well so that you get a little bit of an idea of what those things are. If it's a partnership, like I said, tax a little bit better than in a company, but also a partnership is a civil agreement, which means I am agreeing with my wife that we own a 50% stake each in the property. And what can happen now is we can have a legal agreement around paperwork, just paperwork saying, I have to pay the property fees and everything, and she does the project management as she's an interior designer, and all of these, so there's legal things that we can do. We can also say that she pays half, I pay half, and when she can't pay half, she loses a part of her share, or whatever the case might be. But that needs to be in the partnership agreement. The problem is that it is a civil agreement. And if you're doing that with friends, it sometimes can become really tricky, because how do you then decide to actually buy them out? And how do you decide on a lot of those things? These things need to be specified. Not that these things would go wrong, but sometimes they do. Sometimes things do go wrong, and you plan for the worst and hope for the best. So if you are thinking of this like a stokvel or more like a company, it's a business, it is worth treating it like a business. When I say treating it like a business, that means you register it in a PTY Limited. What that would mean is that you would sort of say, for example, if there's 5 people, each person would have a couple of shares. So for example, you can issue 500 shares in the company, and each person gets 100 shares, and the property is worth 500,000 Rand, for example. And inside of that, you can have special agreements that everybody needs to pay a monthly fee. That would be for the upkeep of the property, the levies, or for growing the portfolio, or whatever that might be. And then have clauses in there to say, if depending on how much money the people put in, then their shares gets distributed and it gets re-indexed every blah blah, or only the shares are only issued later, or whatever the case might be. But sometimes, like I said, even with family, with me and my wife, we can say, we have 100 shares, she's got 50, I've got 50. And what we do is we've got money in the kitty. So if the property is paid off, we don't have to put money in, but we use the money in the kitty to fix the property. It gets taxed at 28%. We don't take money out because that will mean an extra 20% after tax. Profits for dividends tax, and all of these things just get added on. So it can get really complicated really quickly if you want to go the PTY Limited route. But having said that, the limited liability, or the liability that you can have on a company, does make it a little bit more attractive. So for example, if you need to change your name, transfer it from your name to somebody else's name, if it's in a partnership, that costs a lot of money. You need to transfer the property name onto other people's names, and you need lawyers involved, and it's a lot more expensive because the deeds office needs to get involved, and a lot of things like that. But on a property, you just need a lawyer that says, okay, I'm going to redistribute the shares, I'm going to just change the shares from this person to that person. And if your property portfolio is rather big and you're doing it as a group of friends, this can get really complicated if one person wants to leave, because you guys both might own a share in, say, 10 properties, and getting transfer and transfer duties, transfer costs, and all of these things, it gets really expensive. And in that case, it might be better just adding it into a company, because then you just say, oh, I have 250 shares, you have 250 shares, I'm buying you out for the 250 shares, and you've got an agreement in place to say, okay, because you haven't paid this amount of money, this is the amount that we're going to buy you out from, or if this happens and that happens, then this is the way that we're going to do it. And then you just pay the one person, which just makes it a little bit easier. On the other hand, you can also decide to buy it in a trust. Now, generally, this is for, I know of some people that's done this specifically for a business, but also, for example, they've had a case where they and their best friend owns a property and they're going to get married in community of property. Please don't do that. I will stab you. I will throw my coffee all over you. I will pour tea all over, like hot tea all over you, so that you can have third-degree burns. But if something like that happens, it makes sense that if you don't want people to touch that property, to have it in a trust. And especially if you've got friends involved and you do not want to sell the property soon, for example, something like a beach house, which is going to be something where people are going to come together and they're going to use that property. I know that many of the wine farms in the Cape, they do that as well. They add it in a trust, or what they would call a family trust, but I'm sure it's not necessarily a family trust, because if they do want to sell it, they can just transfer the trust, which does make sense, because obviously there's no transfer duties estate duties when you die, because a trust cannot die, and you obviously have multiple trustees on that. So in that case, it does make a lot of sense if you're buying it in that light. So concerning those friends, you also need to, I want to just go on now to the next section, just talking about the relationship with your friends and the relationships and things that go south, which I've mentioned quite a couple of times. You need to decide how close is your friend, how close are you? How good friends are you? Can something go wrong? And what happens if it does go wrong? Property is a very long-term investment. If it's with your wife, it's understandable, or with your sister, or with your father or mother, it does make a little bit more sense than doing it just with a friend or with people that you don't, you haven't known for at least 10 years. Look, even 10 years after, these things do go south. But it's really, really worth just thinking about that friendship, thinking about how close you are, thinking about how the split is going to happen, thinking about how you're going to invest, what are the people going to do, and how are they going to do it. So now that you know more a little bit about the structures and friends and investing with friends, let's now just touch on the last topic, which is the bond. We need to talk about how do you get a bond if you are a lot of people. So in some cases, you're not going to be able to buy it cash. You need to get a bond. You need to firstly decide on who's going to cover the bond and transfer costs, obviously. That's in all cases. You're also going to have to cover the specific section of, who is the bond's name going to be on. The bank is generally not very fond of having 5 people sign surety for the bond. Whether you're doing it in a trust, in a company, or on your own name in a partnership, generally the bank would want you to sign surety for the property, unless the company is self-sustaining, or if it is a property company, they look at the income of all the execs or the shareholders and how much money those people are making. But you need to consider whose name is going to be in. Who's the people that's earning the most money? And maybe it might be 2 out of the 5. Generally 2 or 3 is fine. More than 3 I've found, in my personal opinion, the banks tend to go twitch, what's going on here? Is this high risk, dodge, are we sure we want to do this? So in that case, what you want to do is you want to say, listen, 2 or 3 people is going to apply for it. And then if they get it, excellent. And then they're going to have to sign surety of that. But take note again about the liabilities around that and the risks involved with other people. So when it is that you're getting a bond, make sure that you have the correct paperwork in place and the correct buffer and everything to make sure that you're not going to land in deep water. So like I said, what we found, what I've done previously is I've had the property in 3 people's names. We were 3 people buying together and I had nothing. I was a student at the time. I had absolutely nothing, while the other 2 people actually had enough money. But the bond was registered on all 3 our names, which made it a little bit less risky for them. But again, I had obviously a little bit of a stash of cash and we trusted each other and we were able to pay the monthly fee, the shortfall, until we actually sold the property a couple of years ago. So now that you know about getting a bond as a group of people, you know about the structures that you need for buying a property together with other people, and you also know about just generally trusting and the contracts that you need to have in place. Have a wonderful day and happy investing.